how do we make better decisions? Or think of it like this, how do we make less stupid decisions? If you listen to Charlie Munger or Warren Buffett, they talk about how our goal in life is to try to make less stupid decisions. If we can do that over a period of time, then we're going to win. And I'm going to walk you through in this video the framework that I use and I have learned from studying decision making, being around exceptional decision makers, making my own mistakes, as well as working with over 6,000 gym owners over the last almost 7 years now and helping them build their businesses. So if you're a gym owner and you want to make better decisions, I'm going to walk you through this framework and you can take it and implement it right now to help you figure out where you should focus your time and attention to get the highest return on that resource. But now the next thing that we have to figure out, here's what I think about first. And it's a series of questions, right? And so the first question is, what is the problem I am trying to solve? Usually this one is actually pretty easy for people to figure out. And the reason is because most gym owners are like, well, my business isn't growing. And it hasn't grown for 6 months or a year. I'm not making enough money. And so we have a macro problem that we have. But there's also a lot of other smaller problems that can pop up. And it's really important to make sure that we have a framework that can work for easy solutions as well as more complex solutions. And so the framework that I like to use next is asking this question, how do I know that this is an actual problem? What proof do I have? And I could just be making an assumption. I'll give you an example. I hear a lot from a lot of gym owners over time after working with thousands of them here at Gym Launch. And one of the biggest things that I hear is ads don't work. I hate ads. I get low quality leads and it just doesn't work. How do you know that that doesn't work? Is this an actual problem or is this a belief that I have? I was a gym owner for almost a decade and I have done both no ads and ads. And I have had ads that don't work and ads that absolutely smash and have been the catalyst behind my growth. If we are saying that, hey, ads don't work, what is the problem? My business isn't growing and my ads aren't working or ads just don't work. Well, what proof do we have? You may have your own proof, but the question then becomes is that true for everyone? And that isn't true, which means, okay, maybe it's how we're actually implementing those ads. Did I have the right offer? Did I have the right sales mechanisms? Was I actually getting these people to show up and close them? I really have to figure out, is this a belief that I have or is this actually true? And so we need proof to figure out, is this an actual problem? So the first question is, what is the problem? Then I need proof. How do I know? What data, what metrics, what proof will back up my assumptions that I have? Then the next question we have to ask is, what is the actual constraint? What's causing the problem? For example, I was working with a business owner on a one day that we had, and they were talking about how their business wasn't growing. And I was like, okay, well, how do you know? And it's, well, obvious. Their bank account wasn't growing. Their member count was basically staying the same, and their business wasn't improving. It's like, okay, that's definitely facts right there. But just because we say that doesn't give us any other information that we need in order to figure out what should we do about it. Because we have no idea. We just know it's not growing. And so we have to dive a level deeper and figure out what are the actual constraints keeping this business from growing. And so we dove in and we looked at his numbers. And I asked him first, I was like, what do you think is the biggest constraint? And he said what a lot of gym owners say. And what I used to say. He said that I just need more leads. If I got more leads, my business would grow. And I thought, that's really interesting. Okay. Again, circling back to how do I know? How do you know that that is your problem? And so now we can take this back once we figure out what is the constraint, what are the one or two things that are causing this problem. And it's like, how do you know that that's the problem? And as we dug deeper, we realized that no, leads weren't the actual issue. In fact, I would say that this gym owner, based on where they were, how much they were spending, they were in the top 1% of gym owners in regards to the amount of leads they were getting every month. They were getting over 400 leads a month at a really low lead cost. And so as we dove in and looked at all of the numbers and got a more holistic view of the entire business, we realized a couple things. His lead flow was great. His show rate was great. His close rate was great. And he was making enough money when he closed people. He was selling high ticket and he was doing it really, really well. In fact, he was closing at 60, 65% on packages that are $799 to $2,000. Fantastic. We just need to get more people through. We were getting people to show, but then as we looked at his schedule rate, it was like 23%. It was terrible. And so we're missing out on all of these different leads having a chance to actually book an appointment. And there's lots of different questions that have to go from there. But as we looked at the rest of the business, we also looked at his churn, and his churn was twice what industry average was. And so he was in the 15, 16% range for his style of gym. So now we're faced with two potential solutions. And now this goes into the next phase of kind of what we're looking at. And like, what is a solution? And this requires some thought. It requires data. It requires strategy. It requires great decision making, because now in this gym owner's case, we have two different options we can go down. Let me walk you through a framework that I use when it comes down to having multiple decisions that I have to figure out, and maybe two different things that are wrong in the business. Which one do we go with first? How do we divide and conquer? And can we even divide and conquer? When I think about this, the solution, we had two different ones. We need to fix schedule rates, and then we need to fix churn. Now, there's a lot of gym owners out there, and many people that were in the room that were like, hey, you know what? I think you should focus on churn. And that isn't incorrect, but is it the best decision? And the feedback might be, and you might be watching this video if you're a gym owner and thinking, well, if I don't fix churn, I'm just gonna pour people into a leaky bucket and they're just gonna churn out. You're not wrong. However, let's look at how long is it gonna take to implement this? What are the human resources needed? And what's the highest likelihood of success that I can get in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of resources needed in order to actually make it happen? And when I looked at lead nurture, you've got the owner and one lead nurture person. So you've got two people involved, siloed in one aspect of the business. When I look at churn, you've got all the clients, you've got up to 5 to 6 different staff members in his facility that would have to be a part of this. And if we were gonna implement the right tactics and strategies inside of his gym to reduce churn, it was gonna take longer than if we just focused on lead nurture. Because usually when you do this, churn is a lagging indicator. So we may not see the results of this for a month, 2 months, 3 months. In fact, usually when we go into gyms and we implement the right strategies, churn actually spikes and then it comes back down over time. Within 3 months, they usually drop their churn by 60%. However, we have two problems, and this one is gonna take longer with more resources, while this one, we can focus on 2 people. And so diving it on the lead nurture side, it's figuring out, okay, what are we doing over there? And now the fact that I only have 2 people over there, okay, cool. This is gonna be a lot simpler to fix this, and I'm also gonna be able to see results a lot faster compared to if I was gonna do churn. It doesn't mean that I can just say no to churn forever. It just means that I'm saying yes to fixing lead nurture because I have the highest likelihood of success with the least amount of risk and the least amount of resources needed. But once I'm done with that, I will go back to churn. And so this is really important because the next question that I usually ask is like, when does the decision or solution need to be implemented? This is a very important question because a lot of times you will be faced in your business with lots of different problems, not just one, but multiple problems at the same time. And we have to be able to discern which one should I try to fix now versus later. Is it what we call a house fire or a dumpster fire? A house fire is house is on fire. I gotta get the kids out. I gotta get the family out. This is an immediate problem. But is there a fire in the dumpster outside and it's contained? Okay, I can solve this later. Let's focus on the house fire. And right now in his business, he had 2 fires going on. Lead nurture was gonna be the easiest to solve. And so going back to that, the question then becomes is when does the decision need to be made or the solution implemented? So once we figure out when this decision needs to be made, it's like, okay, cool. Now we've narrowed this down. So we went from, we have a problem, we're not growing, I need more leads. We realized that wasn't the actual problem. And the reason why he said that, by the way, it's really important to understand this. He said that because he loves acquisition. He loves sales. He loves getting leads. He's really good at it. And that is where a lot of gym owners and entrepreneurs mess up, is they focus on things that they enjoy and they're good at, not the actual constraints in the business. And it is our job as gym owners, as business owners, and anyone in any leadership capacity or company to focus on what are the actual constraints in the business keeping us from moving forward, keeping us from creating a better client experience, keeping us from getting more clients, keeping us from growing as a company, rather than what are the things that I'm just really good at and I'll just focus on those. As a gym owner, your basic role is chief problem solver. It's your job to dive into the business, figure out what are the actual constraints, understand how do I know this, dive deeper to make sure you're focusing your time and attention on the things that will actually move the business forward. One of the biggest mistakes that I have ever made at any point in being a gym owner who was broke to being a gym owner that was successful to now running a multi-million-dollar portfolio of 3 companies and having to make lots of decisions all the time is that we have a finite amount of time and attention. And I tend, like many gym owners and entrepreneurs, tend to think that I can do so many different things all at the same time. And then I realized very quickly that I can't because I only have so much time and attention. And it is very important to be able to understand what you are gonna say no to so that you can say yes to something else. Because every time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. Every time you say no, you're saying yes. And it's very important to understand that. We know the decision needed to be made around lead nurture first, so that means churn will be later, and we'll get to that, and it's very important. But now the next thing that we have to figure out is like, number 6 is once we made the decision, how are we gonna do it? And this is really important because now we're diving into the tactical. Now we're getting into the weeds. It's not just one silver bullet, it's hundreds of golden BBs that matter and the basics matter. And so digging in, we realized that their lead nurture person wasn't reaching out to all their prospects or all their leads within 5 minutes. We realized that they were giving up after basically one contact. They weren't sending video text messages. They weren't doing personalized reach outs. They weren't trying multiple different ways to reach out to this person. They were simply just calling them. And if they didn't get them, they'd shoot them a text and that was it. And so there were no systems or processes that were being implemented. And so they were actually just lucky to get people to show up and schedule. And they were banking on all of their leads to self-schedule and then show, which is basically running your acquisition system on a prayer. Lead nurture is what I call the blue collar function of business. It's like ditch digging. No one likes to do it, but it has to be done. And it's one of those things that if you do it correctly, it has a major impact on the business. And so diving into this, we figured out, okay, let's start calling everyone within 5 minutes. Let's follow up with a text message. Then let's follow up with a video text message. And let's do everything we possibly can to get them scheduled. We follow up with a lead 2 to 3 times a day for the first 7 days, just to try to get them scheduled, just to find an appointment. And then we would make sure that once they schedule an appointment, we're following through, we're getting them to show just like they were before, because they were already getting great show rates and their show rates were amazing. So now we figured out, okay, now we have a plan of like, how are we going to do this? But then there's a really important piece that I think a lot of people miss. And this is who is actually going to own this and be responsible for enacting or implementing this solution. And so number 7, who is actually going to do this and be responsible? And so in this scenario, it was the gym owner. And so the gym owner needed to sit down with their lead nurture person after we mapped out how it was going to be done. And they would spend the next 2 weeks working side by side with that lead nurture person for 1 hour to 2 hours a day, watching them make phone calls, watching them reach out to leads, giving them feedback immediately, showing them how to do it, showing them how to do the video text messages, making sure that they were being contacted and setting in the checklist and the tracking measures in place so that they could know whether or not they were being successful. And lo and behold, they did this, they implemented this. The gym owner sat down with this person 1 to 2 hours per day, watched them do it, helped them improve, gave them support, and then within 2 weeks, their schedule rate went from 23% to 52%, which effectively doubled their throughput. Their show rate stayed the same, their close rate stayed the same, and now they doubled their throughput and were making twice as many sales within 2 weeks, just by simply having the gym owner spend 1 to 2 hours a day for 2 weeks, working directly with the person that is actually doing the work and making sure that they're doing the things that need to happen. They didn't have to flip everything on its head. They didn't have to suddenly try some new strategy or anything else. They just did the basics. And just by doing that, within 2 weeks, they had a structure, they had a process. He implemented the steps to track this so that he could hold his lead nurture person accountable. And this gave him the opportunity now to turn his attention from what used to be a problem to the next problem, which is churn. And now he was able to work closely with his team to now implement the right strategies and tactics to decrease his churn and keep his clients longer, providing them a better experience and getting them better results. And over the next 6 months, he cut his churn in half, got it to 8%. And so this took his business within 6 months from $30,000, $35,000 a month to over $70,000 a month with ridiculous profit margins. And he's well on pace to doing over $100,000 a month. First, realizing, do I have a problem? Figuring out, do I have the proof? Like, how do I know? What are the numbers around this? Then figuring out what's the actual constraint in the business that's causing this problem, this macro problem. And then making the decision on which one should I go and try to solve first. We solved the one that had the highest likelihood of success with the least amount of risk and the least amount of resources first, which got us very quick wins. And then that allowed him and gave him the freedom and the time to go now work on something that was more of a lagging indicator and would take longer to implement. Both of them were very important, but one we can fix faster than the other. And if I am faced with an opportunity of fixing one or the other, I'm gonna fix the one that's gonna give me immediate results with the least amount of risk versus having to implement a whole bunch of different things and have a lagging indicator tell me whether or not it was successful. Using this formula, using this framework, you can do this with everything from very simple problems to more complex problems. And you're gonna be faced as a gym owner and as a business owner, or if you're a member of Gym Launch, Prestige Labs, or gymowners.com and you're watching this, you can be faced with lots of complex issues, but you can use this framework to figure out, number 1, what is the problem? What is the actual problem? How do I know it's a problem? What's the reason, the constraint that's causing the problem? What are the multiple different solutions that we could use here? And figure out which one is gonna give me the highest likelihood of success, least amount of downside risk, and use the least amount of resources here, so the simplest option possible. And then you can go into, okay, when does this decision need to be made? Is it now? Is it a house fire or a dumpster fire? And then moving into, great, now how are we actually gonna implement this? And then who is gonna own this? Making sure that there's one person responsible. And if you do that, you're gonna set yourself up to do what Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett talk about in making less stupid mistakes. And if you do that, you're gonna set yourself up for success. Hopefully this was helpful. If you like this stuff, we create a whole bunch of different trainings, and goal here is to provide as much tactical feedback for you as gym owners. And if you have questions about this, drop them in the comments below. Drop a comment, let us know. And I will take some of these comments, or if you have other things you want me to talk about, let me know down below, and I can continue to make content that hopefully is extremely valuable for you.